Please don't abandon your child. I have to. No. This baby needs you. I can't. I don't even know this woman. The words cracked through the courtroom like thunder splitting a dry sky. Gasps rippled across the benches. Reporters leaned forward, pens frozen midair. Even the judge, who had heard every kind of sorrow in his long career, looked up sharply. At the plaintiff's table stood a woman draped in elegance, silk dress, diamond earrings, posture trained by years of pretending control. But beneath the polished surface, she was unraveling. 25 years of fantasy collapsed in a single sentence. "Daniel," she whispered, her voice breaking. "Don't do this." The young man in the witness box did not meet her eyes. His suit was neatly pressed, his jaw steady, his expression carved from something stronger than anger. "My mother," he said calmly, "is the woman who stayed." "Order," the judge commanded, striking the gavel. Across the room, an elderly woman clutched her walking stick. Tears gathered in her wrinkled eyes, not from shock, but from memory. She had waited for this day. Prayed for it. Yet hearing the truth spoken aloud felt like reopening a wound that had never fully healed. "Mr. Daniel Thompson," the judge asked carefully, "are you stating under oath that you do not recognize the plaintiff as your mother?" Daniel finally turned his head. His eyes met the woman who had given him life, and left before he could even say her name. "I recognize her," he replied steadily, "as the woman who abandoned me at 3 months old." The courtroom erupted into murmurs. And so the story did not begin with birth. It began with rejection. 25 years earlier. The night Victoria left, rain fell like the tears of the ancestors. Heavy, relentless, unforgiving. Her suitcase stood by the wooden door. The baby had been crying for nearly an hour. In the small sitting room, her mother, Margaret, rocked the child gently, humming an old church hymn passed down through generations. "Please," Margaret pleaded softly. "At least wait until morning." Victoria stood rigid, arms crossed. "If I wait, you'll gather the neighbors and guilt me into staying. I am 22, Mama. 22. I refuse to tie myself to this mistake." Margaret froze. "Mistake?" she echoed, horror trembling in her voice. The baby cried louder, as if protesting the word itself. "His father disappeared," Victoria continued, refusing to look at the child. "A modeling agency in the city wants me. Do you understand? Money. Freedom. A real life." Margaret stepped closer, holding the baby protectively. "And what is this? A fake life." "It is small," Victoria snapped. "It is suffocating. I was not born to sell vegetables in the market." "And he?" Margaret whispered. "What was he born for?" Victoria hesitated, just for a breath. Then she hardened her heart. "You raised me alone," she said coldly. "Raise him too. You are good at sacrifice." The words struck Margaret like a slap. "You will regret this," she said quietly. "No," Victoria replied, lifting her suitcase. "I will finally live." She opened the door. Rain poured down like judgment from the sky. The baby screamed. Without turning back, Victoria stepped into the storm. The door closed. Margaret sank into a chair, shaking, the child trembling in her arms. "I don't know how," she whispered through tears, "but you will not pay for your mother's selfishness." She looked down at the tiny face pressed against her chest. "You will be called Daniel," she said softly, "because only God will judge between right and wrong." Outside, the rain swallowed Victoria's footsteps. Inside, a grandmother began a battle she never chose. The years of growing. The next morning, reality arrived with the sunrise. Margaret returned to the market, balancing trays of tomatoes and peppers while Daniel slept on a mat behind her stall. She worked until her fingers cracked and her back burned. At night, she sewed clothes beneath a flickering lamp. Poverty knocked daily, but love answered louder. When Daniel turned 5, he tugged at her wrapper one afternoon. "Grandma," he asked innocently, Why don't I have a mummy like Michael? The question pierced deeper than hunger ever had. You have me, Margaret replied gently. But where is she? Margaret knelt and cupped his face. Sometimes adults chase things they think are bigger than love, she said carefully. But you were wanted by me. And that is enough. Daniel nodded slowly. But that night, after he slept, Margaret wept quietly, not because of hardship, but because of the questions that would one day grow sharper. In the city. Meanwhile, the city did not welcome Victoria the way she imagined. The modeling agency offered promises that evaporated like morning dew. Castings led nowhere. Compliments came with conditions. Beauty was currency, and it depreciated quickly. You are beautiful, one photographer told her casually. But beauty fades. You must be useful. The words lingered long after the lights dimmed. On restless nights, when traffic quieted and pride loosened its grip, Victoria would hear phantom cries in the silence, the echo of a baby she had not held in years. Once, she dialed her mother's number. It rang twice. She ended the call. I cannot return empty, she whispered. Not yet. But years have a way of humbling pride. Opportunities faded. Relationships crumbled. The freedom she chased slowly began to resemble loneliness. Back to the courtroom. By the time Daniel became a man, he carried no loud anger, only truth. And truth, when spoken at the right time, is stronger than revenge. Standing in that courtroom, he was not seeking punishment. He was defending the woman who had stayed awake through fevers, who had gone hungry so he could eat, who had shielded his heart from bitterness. My mother, he said again firmly, is Margaret. The elderly woman lowered her head, tears falling freely now. Not all mothers give birth. Some choose to stay. If this story touched your heart and you love powerful African folktales about sacrifice, family, and justice, don't forget to subscribe to African Folktales for more unforgettable stories. Daniel looked at her carefully, absorbing every word as if weighing it against years of silent doubt. So it wasn't me? He asked quietly. Margaret cupped his cheek, her touch warm and steady. Never you. He nodded. But something shifted in him that day. Something quiet, something permanent. A vow formed in the hidden chambers of his heart. He would never beg anyone to stay. Not ever. Desperation did not knock politely on Victoria's door. It kicked it open. By her mid-30s, the city had stripped her of its glitter. The modeling contracts that once shimmered with promise had dried up. The invitations stopped. The compliments turned clinical. You're not 20 anymore, a producer told her bluntly one afternoon, adjusting his watch as though time itself were her greatest flaw. She laughed in public. But that night, alone in her narrow apartment, she stood before the mirror far longer than usual. Fine lines traced the corners of her eyes like quiet accusations. It's just stress, she whispered. Yet when the traffic noise softened into distant murmurs, memories crept in uninvited, a crying baby, her mother's trembling voice, rain pounding against a wooden door. Once again, she picked up her phone and dialed home. It rang. And rang. She ended the call before it connected. Not yet, she told herself. I will return when I have something to show. Pride had become her prison. Back in the village, Daniel was becoming the kind of young man who silenced gossip without raising his voice. At 16, he won regional academic competitions and earned a partial scholarship to a prestigious secondary school in the city. When the acceptance letter arrived, Margaret's hands trembled so badly she nearly dropped it. You see, she cried, holding his face between her palms. God has eyes. But the scholarship covered only tuition. Uniforms, books, transport, those required money they did not have. One evening, Daniel placed the letter gently on the table. Grandma, he said carefully, if it's too expensive, I can stay. I will still succeed. Margaret straightened despite the pain in her knees. Do not insult my sacrifices, she replied firmly. You will go. He swallowed hard. I will make you proud. You already have. That night, after he slept, she sold the last treasure she owned, her late husband's wedding ring. University became Daniel's battlefield. He studied engineering, focusing on renewable energy, driven by memory, by kerosene lamps, by unstable electricity, by watching his grandmother sew in dim light. While others celebrated weekends, Daniel remained in laboratories. "Why are you always so serious?" a friend once teased. "Because someone sacrificed everything for me," he answered quietly. In his final year, he developed a low-cost solar grid prototype designed for rural communities. "There's no profit in villages," one investor scoffed. Daniel met his gaze steadily. "There is dignity." When the pilot program succeeded beyond expectations, those same investors returned, this time with contracts. By 28, Daniel had founded a rapidly expanding renewable energy company serving multiple states. Newspapers called him the light bearer. Margaret simply called him my son. Victoria first saw Daniel's face on a television screen in a small cafe. She nearly dropped her spoon. Young entrepreneur Daniel Thompson, the news anchor announced, whose innovative solar solutions are transforming rural communities. The camera zoomed in, sharp jawline, steady eyes, calm authority. He looked nothing like the crying infant she had left behind. He looked powerful. "That's my son," she whispered before she could stop herself. "The billionaire?" the woman beside her asked skeptically. Victoria straightened. "Yes. We lost touch." Lost touch. The lie tasted bitter. For days she devoured every article, every interview. His foundation. His charity work. His headquarters in the city. His wealth. His influence. His respect. A dangerous thought began to grow. He is mine. My blood. And slowly, guilt transformed into entitlement. He owes me something. Meanwhile, Daniel prepared to relocate his headquarters fully to the city. One quiet evening, he sat beside Margaret on the balcony of their new home. "Are you happy?" he asked. She smiled softly. "I am alive. That is enough." He hesitated. "Do you ever think about her?" "A mother never stops thinking about her child," she said gently. "I meant my mother," he clarified. Margaret exhaled slowly. "I think about the day she may return. Not for me. For you." His expression hardened slightly. "If she comes, she will meet a stranger." Margaret studied him carefully. "Do not let bitterness build a home in your heart." He did not answer. Because somewhere deep inside, a door had already closed. The day Victoria walked into Daniel's corporate headquarters, she wore her most expensive dress, one of the few relics of better days. Her heels clicked sharply against the marble floor. "Good afternoon," she said to the receptionist, lifting her chin. "Please inform Mr. Thompson that his mother is here to see him." The receptionist blinked, then buzzed the office. Victoria's chest tightened as she rehearsed her performance. The tears, the regret, the embrace she imagined would follow. When the office door opened, Daniel looked up calmly from behind his desk. "Yes?" he asked politely. She froze. He had presence now. Authority. Stillness. "Daniel," she whispered. He studied her face with careful detachment. "Do I know you?" Her throat dried. "It's me. Victoria." Recognition flickered in his eyes, but not warmth. "You're early," he said evenly. "Early," she repeated. "For 25 years of silence," he clarified. Each word sliced through her rehearsed emotions. She stepped forward, letting tears fall. "I was young. Foolish. Life punished me too." His voice remained steady. "Did it punish you for leaving me, or for failing elsewhere?" The truth struck harder than she expected. "I am still your mother," she pleaded. He shook his head slowly. "A mother stays." Her voice sharpened defensively. "That old woman turned you against me." He did not waver. "Do not disrespect the woman who carried me when you wouldn't." The weight of her choices finally settled on her shoulders. The boy she abandoned had grown into a man who did not need her, a man shaped by someone else's unwavering love. She straightened, desperation hardening into calculation. "I don't want trouble," she said coolly. "I want my rightful place. Public acknowledgement. Support. That is not too much to ask." Daniel rose slowly from his chair and faced her fully. His voice was low, calm, absolute. "Then let the law decide," he said, "what blood without responsibility is worth." In that moment, Victoria understood something colder than rejection. The infant she had left behind no longer existed. The man standing before her was untouchable. The courthouse. Long before the hearing began, the courthouse was overflowing. Reporters filled the front rows, cameras angled forward, whispers crackling like dry leaves in harmattan wind. "That's her," someone murmured. "The mother who abandoned him. She's suing for recognition and financial support." Victoria sat at the plaintiff's table in a carefully chosen outfit. Soft colors, modest cut, crafted to suggest dignity and suffering. Her lawyer leaned close. "Remember," he whispered. "Emotion wins sympathy." Across the room, Daniel sat beside Margaret. He appeared calm, almost detached, but his jaw tightened each time Victoria looked at him. Margaret touched his hand gently. "Whatever happens," she said softly, "do not let anger speak for you." "It won't," he replied. When the judge entered, silence dropped like a curtain. 25 years of silence were about to be dragged into the light. Arguments. Victoria's lawyer stood first, voice polished and persuasive. "My client is the biological mother of Mr. Daniel Thompson. She was young and misguided when she temporarily left her child in her mother's care. But blood cannot be erased. She seeks rightful acknowledgement and reasonable financial provision from the son she brought into this world." Victoria dabbed at her eyes. "I never stopped loving him," she said shakily. "I watched from afar." Daniel's lawyer rose slowly. "From afar," he repeated calmly. "We request evidence. Letters, bank transfers, school fees, medical records, birthday calls. Any documentation demonstrating parental involvement over the past 25 years. Papers shuffled. There was nothing. Daniel was called to the stand. "She left when I was 3 months old," he said evenly. "There was no contact, no support, no visits. I tried." Victoria cried suddenly. The judge leaned forward. "Do you have proof?" Her mouth opened, then closed. Silence answered for her. The testimony. Then came the moment that stunned the room. Daniel's lawyer called Margaret. The elderly woman walked slowly to the stand, leaning on her stick. The courtroom quieted instantly. "Madam," the lawyer asked gently, "did your daughter ever attempt to reclaim her child before his recent success?" Margaret glanced briefly at Victoria. "Yes," she said softly. Gasps rippled through the room. Daniel turned sharply. "Grandma." The judge leaned in. "Explain." Margaret's voice remained calm. "She came once. When Daniel was 10. She heard he was brilliant and said she wanted to take him to the city. But she said she would not take me with him. She said I would be a burden." The words fell heavily. Victoria froze. Daniel's eyes narrowed, not with fury, but with disbelief. Even after returning, she had chosen herself. Again. In that instant, truth crystallized. No tears could rewrite absence. No charm could erase neglect. The ruling. Closing arguments were brief. Victoria's lawyer leaned on biology. Without her, he insisted, there would be no Daniel. Daniel's lawyer responded quietly. Without his grandmother, there would be no man standing here. Parenthood is responsibility sustained over time, not merely conception. When the judge delivered his ruling, the courtroom held its breath. Parenthood, he said firmly, is not merely an act of birth. It is sustained responsibility. This court finds no evidence of maternal care, financial contribution, or consistent effort by the plaintiff over 25 years. Victoria's composure shattered. "You cannot erase me," she cried. The gavel struck. The echo ended her claim. Outside, cameras flashed. Reporters shouted. "Do you regret leaving? Will you ever forgive her?" Victoria reached toward Daniel, tears streaming. "You've humiliated me," she sobbed. Daniel stopped but did not move closer. "No," he said quietly. "Your choices did that." Margaret stood beside him, her hand resting lightly on his arm. Silent strength. Victoria looked at them both. For the first time, she understood the depth of her loss. She had not just been rejected. She had become irrelevant. Aftermath. That evening, Daniel stood on his balcony, city lights flickering like distant stars. Margaret joined him slowly. "Are you at peace?" she asked. He inhaled deeply. "I thought winning would feel louder," he admitted. She smiled faintly. "Justice is quiet." He hesitated. "Why didn't you tell me she came when I was 10? Margaret exhaled softly. "Because I did not want you to grow up feeling chosen second. You needed to know you mattered first." His throat tightened. For the first time, Daniel allowed himself grief, not for the mother who left, but for the grandmother who stayed and bore the weight of silence alone. Victoria returned home to find an eviction notice taped to her door. Inside, the apartment felt smaller than ever. She sat on the edge of her bed and replayed the courtroom. The judge's words, Daniel's steady gaze, Margaret's quiet testimony. "I would be a burden." She had said it casually once. Now it echoed like a verdict. Standing before the mirror, the same ritual she performed 25 years earlier before walking into the rain, she no longer saw possibility. She saw consequence. "If I had stayed," she whispered. But time does not bargain with regret. Weeks passed. Media attention faded. So did acquaintances. Pride had cost her family. Entitlement had cost her dignity. One afternoon, in rare honesty, she boarded a bus back to the village. She stood outside Margaret's house, the same house she once fled. Through the window, she saw Daniel laughing softly as he helped Margaret water the plants. They did not look wealthy. They looked whole. And finally, she understood something devastating. She had not been replaced. She had been unnecessary. She turned away without knocking. Some doors close not with noise, but with quiet finality. That evening, Daniel and Margaret watched the sunset together. "Do you hate her?" Margaret asked gently. He thought carefully. "No," he said at last. "I just accept her." Margaret nodded. Acceptance is stronger than hatred. He looked at her, the woman who chose hardship over escape, sacrifice over freedom. "Everything I am," he said softly, "is because you stayed." She squeezed his hand as the sky darkened, and the story settled into its final truth. Blood may begin a life, but love is what sustains it.